I never thought I'd do something so wrong. Yet the moment I touched her, everything changed. My heart was screaming, my mind was warning me, but I couldn't stop. And in that instant, nothing would ever be the same. The first day I saw her, I knew something would change. I wasn't sure what it was yet. Maybe it was her presence, that quiet authority she carried without trying, or the way her eyes seemed to notice everything around her, yet lingered on nothing. She was my literature teacher, mid-30s, elegant without being flashy, her dark hair always perfectly in place as if it were a reflection of her meticulous mind. I tried to focus on the syllabus she handed out, her voice calm but magnetic, the words tumbling over each other in my ears, yet my gaze kept finding her. Something about her made the room feel warmer, the air heavier, and my chest tighten in a way I hadn't felt before. I kept telling myself it was just admiration, a passing crush, the kind every student felt for a teacher once or twice in their life. But it wasn't passing. It lingered, clung to me like a second skin. I noticed the way she would lean over a student's desk, explaining a concept with patience and a soft smile that made everything she said seem important. When she passed by me, her perfume, subtle, like vanilla and rain, hit me, and I realized my stomach flipped involuntarily. During the second week of classes, she called me after class. My heart jumped before I even knew why, and I followed her to the empty classroom. "I noticed your essay on Wuthering Heights," she said, her tone light, but with a warmth that made me feel seen. "You have a good sense for character motives. I'd like to help you develop it further." My mouth went dry. "Sure," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. That evening, I sat in the library, pretending to focus on the essay while my mind replayed every detail of her smile. The brush of her hand when she passed me the paper, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed. I told myself to stop thinking like this. She was my teacher. This was wrong, but every time I tried to push it away, the thoughts came back stronger, like a tide I couldn't resist. The following week, she held office hours after school. I hesitated, my stomach nodding, before deciding to stay back. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old books, the kind of smell that made your chest ache with nostalgia. She greeted me with the same warm smile, one that made the air between us feel electric. "I'm glad you decided to stay," she said, her eyes meeting mine in a way that made me forget how to breathe. We talked about my essay, but the conversation quickly drifted. She asked about my favorite books, my ambitions, even the little things about my day. I found myself laughing at things I didn't even think were funny, just because she was listening. Every time her hand brushed against mine when pointing at a passage in my essay, a shiver ran up my spine. I pulled away slightly, reminding myself of the line I shouldn't cross. Days turned into weeks, and every interaction with her was a mix of excitement and guilt. I watched her from across the classroom, noticing the small details, the way her hair caught the sunlight, the quiet determination in her posture, the softness in her voice when she encouraged someone struggling with a passage. I couldn't explain why I felt drawn to her, only that the pull was undeniable. One afternoon, as she handed back our graded essays, her fingers grazed mine for just a moment longer than necessary. I felt my pulse spike, and I looked up at her face, catching her eyes just as they flickered with something I couldn't name. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my heart thump painfully in my chest. I wanted to say something, to reach out, to tell her I couldn't stop thinking about her, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I left the classroom, my mind a whirlwind. I told myself this was infatuation, nothing more. I had to stop. I couldn't let myself think otherwise, yet every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smile, heard her voice, felt that brief touch, and every time a tiny dangerous spark ignited inside me. That night, lying in bed, I found my thoughts wandering again to her. I tried to study, tried to distract myself, but my mind betrayed me, replaying every moment, every glance, every smile. I knew it was wrong. I knew that giving in to these feelings could ruin everything, my reputation, her career, both our lives if anyone ever found out. But still, a small undeniable part of me whispered that this attraction, this longing was something I couldn't ignore. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a fleeting crush. This was the beginning of something I couldn't control, something that would pull me into a world of desire and forbidden temptation I had only ever read about in books. I shivered at the thought, part of me terrified, part of me unable to resist. I never thought that a single brush of her hand, a single lingering glance, could start a chain of events that would consume me completely, but deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The days after that brief charged moment in class, I found myself noticing her everywhere. Her silhouette against the classroom window, her fingers gliding across the keyboard as she typed up grades, the quiet sigh she let out when a student struggled with a passage. Every small movement made my chest tighten. I told myself it was just fascination, admiration for a brilliant teacher, but deep down, I knew it was something far more dangerous. She began offering extra sessions for those who needed help with their essays, and I found myself signing up every week, sometimes more than once, just to spend time with her. The office became our little world, quiet, secluded, filled with the scent of old books and faint vanilla. She would sit across from me, reviewing my writing, her pen gliding along the margins, occasionally brushing against my hand. Every time it happened, I would flinch, then feel a thrill that made my stomach flutter. I was supposed to resist, to keep my distance, but it was impossible. "I can see real potential in your work," she said one afternoon, leaning slightly closer, her voice soft. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, it felt like she was looking right into my soul. "You have a way of understanding the character's motives, seeing what others might miss. I think you could go far." I tried to smile, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with pride in my writing. She started asking about me. Really asking, not the superficial questions everyone else asked, but about my dreams, what I wanted from life, what made me happy. I told her little bits, careful to hide the parts of me that were too vulnerable, but somehow she always seemed to know what I was holding back. And when she smiled, the kind of smile that made the air hum around her, I felt my resolve cracking. One day she asked me to stay after class, my stomach twisted, anticipation and guilt colliding. We went to her office and she closed the door quietly behind us. "I wanted to talk about your essay," she said, but it wasn't the essay that occupied her mind. Or mine. Her eyes lingered on mine and the faint curve of her lips suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. She leaned over the desk to show me a correction, her hair brushing my shoulder ever so slightly. My breath caught, and I had to remind myself that this was wrong, that every inch of proximity was a line I shouldn't cross, yet every moment with her drew me closer. I found myself arriving early for class just to catch her glance, lingering after just to hear her voice. She had a way of speaking that made me forget everything else, that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. I began to crave it. The sound of her laughter, the way her hand hovered near mine when she wrote on the whiteboard, the way she seemed to notice when I looked at her, as if she could feel what I felt. It was during one of these extra sessions that the boundaries started to blur. She was showing me a passage from a novel, pointing out the layers of emotion hidden in the text. I leaned in to see the page more clearly, and our elbows brushed. A jolt of electricity shot through me, and I caught myself staring at her hand a moment too long. She didn't pull away. Instead, her eyes met mine, and for a hot beat, it felt like the world had shrunk until it was just the two of us. "Careful," she said softly, a teasing lilt in her voice that made my pulse race. "You're too close." I nodded, pretending to focus on the book, but my mind was spinning. Was it fear? Desire? Both? I didn't know anymore. I just knew I couldn't stop thinking about her, couldn't stop wanting that small, forbidden closeness. After that day, our interactions grew subtly more intimate. A hand lingered a little longer on my shoulder when guiding me through a concept, a glance that felt loaded with meaning when she praised my analysis. I knew it was dangerous. Every rational thought screamed at me to stop, to pull away, to forget the way my heart leapt every time she smiled at me. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something inside me had already surrendered. One evening, she stayed late grading papers and I lingered in the empty classroom, pretending to finish an assignment. I wasn't fooling anyone, least of all myself. When she noticed me, she closed her laptop and walked over, her presence filling the space, making it impossible to focus on anything else. "You're still here," she said, not as a question but a statement. Her eyes softened and she smiled, a small private smile meant just for me. I wanted to make sure I understood today's lesson, I stammered, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. She didn't comment on the obvious lie. Instead, she reached over to adjust the collar of my shirt, a touch so light it could have been accidental, but it wasn't. My heart hammered. I wanted to pull away, yet I stayed rooted to the spot, feeling her warmth linger near me. Her voice was gentle, almost conspiratorial. "You're very dedicated," she said. "I admire that." There was something in the way she looked at me, an intensity I couldn't define. I wanted to lean closer, to tell her everything my heart had been whispering, to close the distance that had been torturing me for weeks. But I didn't. Not yet. As I walked home that night, Every step echoed in my mind. I tried to focus on the streetlights, the sounds of the city, the mundane world around me, but it was impossible. I could feel her hand on mine, her eyes on mine, her presence in the air, and I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. I was no longer just attracted to her. I wanted her. I wanted everything about her. I knew it was wrong, dangerously wrong, yet I couldn't deny it. And in the deepest, most secret part of myself, I also knew I wouldn't stop no matter how much I tried. Every glance, every brush of her hand, every word she spoke had set something in motion that I couldn't reverse. I didn't know where this path would lead or how far I would fall, but for the first time I realized I didn't care. And I never thought that a single touch could unravel everything I thought I knew about right and wrong, yet make me ache for more in a way I hadn't imagined. This was just the beginning, and I feared and craved every second of it. It was during one of those late afternoon tutoring sessions that everything changed. The classroom was empty, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence, mingling with the faint scent of her perfume. She'd asked me to stay behind to discuss my latest essay in more detail, but it was impossible to focus on the words on the page. My eyes kept drifting to her, the curve of her neck, the way her hair fell over her shoulder, the soft, almost hypnotic rhythm of her breathing. She noticed, of course. Her gaze lingered on me longer than necessary, and I felt my pulse spike. I told myself to concentrate, to look at the essay, to ignore the heat creeping across my chest. But every time our hands brushed while she pointed out a sentence, I felt that same electric thrill, only stronger this time. I realized, with a mixture of fear and excitement, that I was no longer just drawn to her. I was on fire for her, and it was impossible to hide. "Your analysis here is impressive," she said, her voice softer than usual. She leaned over my shoulder, and our faces were closer than ever. I could see the flecks of color in her eyes, the way they seemed to hold something unspoken. I swallowed hard, aware of how close we were, aware of the tension thickening the air around us. Thank you," I managed to whisper, my throat dry. My hands shook slightly, and I wanted to pull away, to run, to remind myself that this was wrong. But my body betrayed me. I stayed, leaning a little too close, caught in the magnetic pull I couldn't resist. She straightened up, her fingers brushing mine one last time as she handed back my essay. The touch lingered in my mind long after it was gone, burning a trail across my skin. I could feel her presence behind me as I packed my bag, and when I turned to leave, our eyes met again, holding, searching, daring. "I think you're ready for the next step," she murmured, almost to herself, almost teasing. My heart skipped a beat. "Next step?" I asked, barely audibly, my voice trembling. She smiled, that private smile that made the room shrink around me. "I think you know what I mean." For a moment, silence stretched between us, thick with anticipation. My mind screamed at me to leave, to put distance between us before we did something irreparable. But my heart refused. Desire coursed through me like a storm I couldn't tame. I wanted her closer, wanted her to touch me, wanted her to see everything I had kept hidden inside. Then it happened. A misstep, a stumble. I don't even remember which, and our hands collided, fingers tangling. The electricity was immediate, undeniable. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened, a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't name. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let her hand rest against mine, thumb brushing lightly over my knuckles. My breath hitched, and I realized how long I'd been waiting for this moment without even admitting it to myself. "You're very close," she whispered, leaning a fraction nearer. Her voice was low, intimate, and I felt it vibrating straight through me. I knew then that she had noticed my longing, just as much as I had noticed hers. My mind screamed that this was forbidden, that it was dangerous, that it could ruin everything. And yet, in that moment, every rational thought was drowned out by desire. I can't," I stammered, the words escaping my lips before I could stop them. I knew they were meaningless because I wasn't going anywhere. I was rooted to the spot, heart hammering, eyes locked on hers. "I know," she murmured, her lips so close I could feel her breath. "I know." And then, slowly, impossibly, she leaned in. Our lips met. A soft, tentative kiss, brief but searing. My entire body went taut with shock and exhilaration. I froze for a moment, unsure if I should push away, if I should stop this madness, but the warmth of her lips, the electric connection, made every instinct I had scream to stay. It was wrong. I knew it, the moment our lips parted, yet I didn't pull away. I couldn't. Desire, longing, a deep, unspoken connection. It all tethered me to her. My chest ached with the intensity of the feeling, a mix of fear and exhilaration that left me dizzy. The kiss ended, but the tension didn't. We pulled back just enough to breathe. Faces, inches apart, eyes locked in a silent conversation that needed no words. I could feel her heartbeat rapid and steady all at once, and I knew she felt it too. I began, my voice trembling, but she cut me off with a finger to my lips, gentle but insistent. "Don't," she whispered. "Not yet. Just feel it," and I did. I felt everything, every spark of desire, every ache of longing, every dangerous, forbidden thrill. I knew this was a line we shouldn't cross, a temptation too sweet to resist. But I didn't care. Not anymore. That evening, I left the classroom in a daze, walking home with my thoughts spinning out of control. I replayed every touch, every glance, every whisper, and I knew one thing with certainty. This wasn't just a moment. It was a turning point. A forbidden line had been crossed, and neither of us could go back to the way things were before. I had no idea what would come next. I knew it was dangerous, scandalous even, and yet I couldn't stop thinking about her, couldn't stop craving the warmth of her hand, the sound of her voice, the way she looked at me, as though I were the only person in the world, and I never imagined that a single stolen kiss could change everything I thought I knew about right and wrong. But deep down, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. This was just the beginning, and I knew we were both teetering on the edge of something irresistible, something that would pull us into a storm of desire we couldn't escape. The late afternoon sun spilled through the classroom windows, painting everything gold, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. I was sitting at the desk, my hands trembling slightly as I stacked my papers, waiting for her to arrive for our session. I knew what this was becoming. We were teetering on the edge of something forbidden, intoxicating, and I couldn't stop the rapid thumping of my heart. When she walked in, I nearly gasped. Her hair was slightly tousled from the day, a few loose strands falling across her face, and her blouse was soft against her skin in a way that made my chest ache. She smiled, that slow, private smile that always left me breathless. "Ready?" she asked, but I wasn't sure if she meant for the essay or for what I already knew was inevitable. We sat close, closer than ever before, our knees brushing under the table. She guided me through my analysis, her hand lightly resting over mine as she pointed to a passage. The context sent shivers up my arm, and I felt my breath catch. My mind screamed at me to stop, but every nerve in my body was alive, craving more. Her eyes flicked to mine, a mix of warning and invitation, and then she leaned in, almost imperceptibly, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. The heat of her fingers lingered, and I shivered. She lowered her voice, intimate and husky. "You've been holding back, haven't you?" I couldn't speak. I shook my head, but the truth was written all over me. Desire, longing, and the ache of forbidden temptation radiated from every fiber of my being. She smiled softly, almost knowingly, before leaning closer. My pulse quickened as her lips hovered near mine. "Do you want this?" she whispered. The question hung in the air, heavy, impossible to ignore. I swallowed hard, unable to lie. "Yes," I breathed, barely audible. Then her lips were on mine, soft at first, testing, tentative. The kiss sent a jolt through me that I couldn't control. My hands went to her waist almost instinctively, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she pressed closer, guiding me gently, urgently, her fingers threading through my hair. My entire body was alight with sensation, every thought of right and wrong replaced by the heat of the moment. I felt her lips trace mine slowly, teasingly, and then her hand slid from my waist to my back, pulling me flush against her. I gasped, my chest pressing against hers, the forbidden thrill making my senses sharper, more acute. Every brush of her skin, every whisper of her breath against my lips made me ache with need. "Shh," she murmured, nipping gently at my lower lip, her voice a soft command that made my knees weak. "It's just us right now." And it was true. The world had fallen away. There was no morality, no consequences in that golden sunlit room, only her, only this, only the undeniable, all-consuming desire that had been building for weeks. Her hands moved with deliberate slowness, tracing the curve of my neck, down to my shoulders. I shivered under her touch, my fingers clutching at the fabric of her blouse. Every nerve screamed, every instinct whispered danger, yet it was more intoxicating than anything I had ever known. I couldn't get enough of her, of this, of the way our bodies seemed to fit together so perfectly despite the world telling us it was wrong. Her lips left mine briefly to trail along my jaw, sending sparks of heat through me. "You're mine," she whispered, and the words made my chest ache. I wanted to deny it, to say no, to step back. But the craving, the fire inside me, was unstoppable. I leaned into her, pressing my body closer, feeling every inch of her skin, every brush of her hair against my cheek. We moved together instinctively, a dangerous, intimate rhythm that had nothing to do with anything but desire. Her hands cupped my face, tilting my head so our lips met again, harder this time, hungrier. My fingers tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, feeling the tremor in her body as I matched it with my own. The forbidden nature of what we were doing made it taste even sweeter, sharper, impossible to resist. Time didn't exist. There was only the warmth of her body, the slick heat of her lips, the soft moan that escaped her throat when I brushed a little too eagerly against her. Every nerve in my body screamed for more, and she responded in kind, guiding me, teasing me, pulling me further into a world I had only ever imagined in dreams. And now, it was real. Finally, we paused, chests heaving, foreheads pressed together. My heart was racing, my body on fire, and yet I didn't want it to stop. She looked at me with eyes full of something I had never dared to hope for: desire, tenderness, and an unspoken promise. "You don't know how long I've wanted this," she whispered, and I felt my pulse hammer. "And I can't stop." I shivered, knowing I felt the same, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. Every touch, every kiss, every heated glance had pulled us over a line we could never uncross, and though fear still lingered in the back of my mind, it was drowned out by the burning truth. I was hers, and she was mine in this stolen, forbidden world we had created together. As I left that evening, my body still humming with the memory of her, I realized I had crossed a point of no return. Desire had claimed me completely, and the line between right and wrong no longer mattered. All that mattered was her, and I knew, deep down, that the fire between us had only just begun, threatening to consume everything in its path. I had no idea how far this would go or how dangerous it could become, but I couldn't stop. And the thought of her waiting, of her hands, her lips, her gaze, made me ache in ways I had never imagined. I had fallen, completely and irreversibly, into something I knew I shouldn't, but something I couldn't resist. The first day after graduation felt surreal. The campus was quieter now, the echoes of our secret moments lingering in my mind. I walked through the empty halls, memories of stolen touches and lingering glances flashing through me. But today was different. Today, the restrictions that had once defined us were gone. She was free to be with me, and I was free to finally let myself fall completely. I found her waiting for me near the old library steps, the same place we had shared our first, real conversation about our desires. She smiled, that slow, knowing smile that still made my chest ache. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," she said, teasing, but her eyes held the warmth and intensity I had craved for months. "I couldn't stay away," I admitted, my voice trembling, "not after everything." She stepped closer, her fingers brushing mine as they always did, but this time, there was no need to hide. The touch was public, open, and somehow sweeter for it. "Nor could I," she whispered, leaning in, and our lips met in a kiss that was soft, lingering, and entirely ours. The world around us seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of us and the love we had fought to acknowledge. We spent the afternoon together, walking through the familiar paths we had once tiptoed around, careful not to be seen. Now, we laughed openly, held hands, and whispered words that had been trapped in the shadows for far too long. I felt her warmth, her presence, her love, and I knew that every stolen moment, every risk we had taken had led to this perfect freedom. Later, sitting on a bench under the golden sunset, she turned to me, her hand resting on mine. "We don't have to hide anymore," she said softly. "We can be together, fully, without fear." I smiled, the weight of months of secrecy lifting from my shoulders. "I've wanted this for so long," I admitted. "Being with you, it feels like coming home." She leaned in, resting her forehead against mine. "Then we'll make it our home," she whispered. And in that moment, I believed her. I believed that what had once been forbidden could now become something real, lasting, and beautiful. For the first time, I didn't worry about right or wrong, about whispers or judgment. All that mattered was her, and the way she made my heart race, the way her touch grounded me, and the way her love had become the safest, most thrilling place I had ever known. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized that our story, one that had begun with stolen glances and whispered temptations, had finally found its rightful ending. We had crossed every line, braved every risk, and in doing so, discovered a love that was ours alone. And I knew, with every beat of my heart, that this was only the beginning of a lifetime we would share, unashamed, unstoppable, and utterly in love. I crossed a line I swore I'd never approach, and now, even as I crave her more than ever, guilt and desire tangle inside me. We weren't supposed to fall for each other, yet here we are. What are we now? Am I brave or foolish? Tell me, would you risk everything for someone forbidden?